Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin. Are we in a bear market? If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So I see a lot of people talking about, are we in a bull market? Are we in a bear market? And as far as I'm concerned, as I've mentioned about 1,000 times on the channel, when we're below the 20-week SMA, things are bearish. Or below the 21-week EMA. I mean, if you just look at us being below it, the entire market sentiment has changed. Market conditions have changed. Altcoins don't seem nearly as bullish now. Some of them are still putting in some little runs, and they're trying to pump higher. But with the bearish Bitcoin, nothing's really going to go anywhere. Okay, and so I think we should also distinguish between a bear market or a bull market and a market cycle. Is a market cycle limited to one bull market? Is it limited to one bull market? And I don't think the answer is yes. I think that a bull market can be a part of a market cycle, but that bull market doesn't have to last the entire market cycle. Now, what I mean by that, again, if you go back to 2013, we had an 80% drop in the middle of the year. And we even closed below the 20-week SMA here. But we had an 81% drop, and we trended down over several months. We didn't put in a new all-time high for 6 months. For 6 months. That's not a bull market to me. I mean, if we can't put in a new all-time high for 6 months, I don't consider that to be a non-stop bull market. The market sentiment changed for a while, and then we continued to move later on. Okay, everyone likes to compare this cycle with the last one and say, well, this one just had, and by the way, I like to compare it with the last one too, but I think a lot of people like to compare it with the last one and say it's going to do exactly that. But again, this one had a lot of 40% corrections, it had a lot of 30% corrections, but they all held support on the bull market support band. But again, we never had a phase where we went more than like 2 or 3 months or so without testing the bull market support band. We always went back down and tested it. And this one was probably the longest one before the final one, which was closer to 4 months. But most of these were only about 3 or 4 months between tests of the 20-week SMA or the 21-week EMA, if you prefer. And so this market structure was a lot different. It was a lot, there was a lot more market structure in the first place. Go down or go up, test the bull market support band. Go up, test it. Up and test it. And you just keep repeating the same thing. And then finally we went too far, and we were too far gone, and we were in a bear market for about a little over a year, and then an accumulation phase for about a year. So, but you look over here, and we went below it, but we didn't ultimately have a year or 2 year bear market followed by an accumulation phase and do something like that. We almost immediately went back up. Now, I've said before that I think this summer could be a lull in the market. I think, and maybe even beyond this summer, but I think that we're in for some bearish times for a while. So if you strictly took the definition of, are we above the 20-week SMA or below the 20-week SMA, or are we above the 21-week EMA or below the 21-week EMA, you would say, okay, well, things are bearish right now. We're not just below it, we're also significantly below it. We're like 27% below it, 28%. That's pretty far down. So I get that there's some people telling you that we're going to have a V-shaped recovery and we're going to be going up to, these crazy valuations within just a few months. But I don't think you're doing yourselves any favors if you're not considering the downside risk. And putting out bearish scenarios is not a bad thing. You should consider bearish scenarios. You shouldn't just say, oh, it's FUD, and don't bother me with FUD. Like, all I want to hear is going up every single day. You're not doing yourself any favors. If anything, considering the bearish scenarios helps you capitalize on it if it does go very bearish, okay? We've moved up so quickly that getting a brief period where we either go down or sideways and then continue on, it's not a bad thing. And we've talked a lot before about what could be theoretical downside targets in the event that the bear market is sustained. And 20K isn't out of the question. Some people say that, Well, we've never gone back to test a prior all-time high in the past, therefore why should we do it this time? So let's show you what they mean. I mean, here's an example. After we passed the prior all-time high here, we never went back and tested it. Again, you look at this one. After we passed the prior all-time high, we never went back and tested it. And so the argument becomes, well, why should we this time? Why should we this time? Is there any reason we have to go back and test it? Of course not. We don't have to test it. We could never see 20K again. We could never see 25K again. But if you operate deterministically and say we will not see 20K again, and then we do see it again, are you prepared to take advantage of that move? Or did you go all in at 60K because everyone was telling you it was going to go to 300K by the end of the year? So by allowing yourself to consider the downside risk, it allows you to probably have some stable coins on the sideline to DCA into the market if things get bearish. If you only ever assume things are going to go up, then whenever they pull back down, you're going to have people scrambling to change their 300K predictions by the end of the year scenarios to come up with a reason why that's not going to play out. When, as we said before, the evidence for a 300K Bitcoin by the end of the year was basically non-existent, and the idea that we're going to go there by the end of this year is a little bit far-fetched. If it goes there, fine, but it's a little bit far-fetched. So in looking at potential downside scenarios, you always have to consider that things could be bearish for a few months. And if they are, where could they go? Well, again, the 50-week could offer some level of support. It's offered levels of support in the past. We've bounced off of it in the past, right? There's a bounce here. We could bounce off it. I think there was another bounce over here. So looking at the 50-week could be an area to look at. That's around 28K or maybe a little over 28K. I think right now it's at 28,229 or 296, 28,296. So that might be the first area to look at in the event of a sustained correction. And if we keep coming down, I'm curious how people are going to say that that is still a bull market. I mean, if you're going down 50 to 60%, you're definitely having some change in market sentiment. If you're below the bull market support band, you can take one look at altcoins and realize a lot of them look relatively weak. A lot of them aren't anywhere close to their all-time highs right now. And they're probably not going to get there as long as Bitcoin stays bearish. So I say again, things can be bearish for a while, and it's not a bad thing as long as you are prepared for that scenario. I think some people think you either have to go all in or all out. My philosophy is you can have some in the market, but also have some out of the market so that it allows you to push in if things go up. The way to win in crypto is to prepare for every situation and not to be deterministic about any situation and say that it has to do what you think because someone on YouTube or Twitter told you it was going to do so. So let's consider the downside possibilities, and if they happen, then in my opinion, it just represents an opportunity, okay? So the first one here would be the 50-week, if in fact we continue to move down, but the 100-week is even further down at 18.5. The 200-week is even further down. Now, I don't think we're going to go to these prices at 12 or 13K. If we do trend down to the 200-week, it could take several months. I mean, it could take several months, and maybe we get close to it. Maybe we don't hit it. But I mean, these things can happen where we come down and then continue our run, and then we get a consolidation phase. I would argue we're already in this consolidation phase, reaccumulation phase. I don't know how far down we're going to go, but I do think that we're already in it now. I mean, again, I've said before that buying Bitcoin when it's 50% down isn't always the best time to buy because we know it can go lower. But we do know it's not the worst time to buy because at least you're not buying at 64K when it's trading at 36K or even lower, or 30K or 25K. So when we look at this, we have to be honest and say, well, things are relatively bearish right now, and that if things continue to trend down, we need to look at some of these longer term moving averages as potential areas of support. If you listen to someone that just says deterministically that it has to have a V-shaped recovery because that's what it did last cycle, then you're operating in a very deterministic way, and a lot of times in crypto, acting in a deterministic way is the recipe for not doing well. So don't be deterministic about things. Have some flexibility. Having some stable coins on the sideline to DCA into the market if things are bearish for a little while is fine. Again, in 2019, things were bearish for about 6 months. if you look at the time between tests of the bull market support band, let's suppose we play out that scenario again. I mean, we fell below it here. We didn't test it as support again for about half a year. Again, here's another example. We fell below it. We didn't test it as support for about half a year. We fell below it here. What if we don't move back above it and test it as support for about half a year? I mean, if that plays out, I mean, maybe we come down, maybe we go back up, we hit the bull market support band, maybe we get rejected by it, and we keep coming down, and then we come back up, we get back above it, and then we come back down and test it as support, and maybe we hold it, and then we continue to run. And I think that there's a lot of people that don't consider this to be a possibility because everyone's telling them it's going to go to 300K by the end of the year. Let's consider it as a possibility before we get too deterministic about things, because again, what are you going to do if it's the end of the year and the price isn't 300K like every other person told you? What are you going to do? Are you prepared for that? If you're fine, who cares, right? I mean, if you're just going to hold, who cares? But if you're playing with money that you really can't afford to lose, which you shouldn't be doing anyways, but if you are, then operating in a deterministic way, again, is a recipe for disaster. So right now, things look bearish to me. Again, we're below the bull market support band. That's the main indication for me. We're above it, things are bullish. We're below it, things are bearish. If we get back above it in a few weeks, all right, maybe we're off to the races if we hold the bull market support band as support and can continue on. Until that happens, I think people need to really stop operating deterministically and assuming that it will happen. Sometimes it's healthy to be a little bit bearish sometimes and realize that things can go down for a little while, and it's not the worst thing in the world as long as you're not investing more than you can afford to lose and you're managing your risk appropriately. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Check out the sale on the premium list. If you want to know how I'm navigating these markets, you can find a link to that in the description below as well. We also do have some t-shirts and whatnot in the merch store. Check that out. You can find a link to that as well down below. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe if you guys like the content. Let's go for 450,000 subscribers. Give the video a thumbs up. Click the bell icon to turn on your notifications. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Bye.